Hi guys, welcome to another episode of high quality Quizable content. Today we're going to be going over my top 10 teams ballot for the Illinois postseason poll. Make sure to vote in that. And I am, as always, I'm joined by,
Arjun.
so Arjun's going to be joining me here. This is going to be the last one that I foresee doing. I'm not going to be doing an RM or PSS poll just because I don't believe I have enough. I don't think that I have good ballots for those, so I'm not confident enough to make a video. So anyway, we're just going to begin over my top 10 teams, a countdown. So at the number 10 spot, I had Williamsville, edging out some other good teams like Auburn, Alton, Stevenson B. So Williamsville, led by Nathan Clack, who's a literature-focused generalist. Strong specialist support as well. If you look at his NEQT state, his at Williamsville NEQT state, his teammates definitely were contributing factors there. Aside from that, Williamsville had a very strong performance on HFT at Baron Robinson, and they've just been like a pretty solid team all year. When we played against them at NEQT State, they actually brought it really close against us, which was definitely unforeseen. I didn't realize that they were that good, so I think they definitely deserve this number 10 spot. Have you guys played Williamsville? You played them at
Uh,
NEQT State, right?
so we play him at NEQT State also.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do you remember much from that game?
um, now I do not remember anything. At the time, though, I remember being impressed, but I don't remember what I'm impressed by. So,
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't remember anything. The only things that I remember from our game against them was like me just making bad buses. But anyway, I don't know. I found them very impressive. I think they're definitely one of the stronger downstate teams, and yeah, they were definitely a very strong force this year. So in the number 9 spot, we have Latin School of Chicago, led by Tejas Sudali, but definitely a very well balanced team. Outside of Tejas, there's also Will Kravitz and oh wait, who are there? Okay, wait, I have it open this stuff. Will Kravitz, Theo Kokonis, Rose Branson, and Kenny. So I've played them several times throughout the years. Like I've played a lot of these players in the past. This year I only played them, I think, at Masonic, where they had like a pretty close game against us. I was definitely impressed, and we were only able to eke it out against them off of some questionable bonuses that went in our favor. So I don't know. I've just been impressed by them for most of the year. I think that them and Williamsville are pretty close. If you look at NAQT State, which is probably the best metric by which we have to measure teams' capacity for nationals level sets, um, Latin and in Williamsville, they had pretty similar stats. Latin outpowering them by a decent margin, but with Williamsville having a higher PPB by a decent margin. So I think that's an interesting dichotomy. Uh, yeah, aside from that, I don't really have much to say. Have you played Latin at all this year?
we played them like I think we played twice at Early Bird and then once at ACFL and once at NEQT State. At ACFL, they beat us when we didn't have Cohen, which was their like performance again was pretty impressive, and I don't know. Yeah, they seem to be like their A team. Like I wasn't entirely sure what their A team was because I think like changed like they didn't play their full A team at early bird or something. I don't know what happened, but like when they have their full A team, they're definitely a solid team and a team to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I agree, and especially beating like even Stevenson without Govan is still like a very strong team. Like judging by their ACF fall wins and also their performance on Auburn's HFT mirror, where they had insanely good stats. And I feel like beating Stevenson even without Govan is definitely a commendable result. So Latin definitely a very strong team. Close as Williamsville. A lot of these teams that finished in like the lower bracket of the playoffs of the championship bracket of NEQT State are very close in statistics. But I chose to put Latin over Williamsville just because of the higher power count and also that impressive win over Stevenson there. And there's also just more data of them playing against better teams. So in the number 8 spot, I put Springfield. Springfield definitely laid low for a lot of the season. I feel like their kickoff was good, but not um, that mind blowing. But definitely their performance on NEQT State, where they didn't necessarily have the highest power count, but they notched a lot of good wins against teams in this tier. And I think that definitely solidified them in my mind as being above Latin and Williamsville at least. I think that this end of season, or it wasn't going to be end of season, but I suppose now we know now end of season performance was very impressive. where they beat Fremd and Latin and Williamsville in some very impressive games, and they brought it pretty close against us. And also had a very strong game against Stevenson. Do you remember anything from your game against Springfield?
Now I do not remember, but yeah, they had like some good. I wasn't there for the first game, where it was like a little bit less close, but like in our second game against them, they definitely had some impressive buzzes. At Masonic, like we played against them in our bye game. Again, this is all anecdotal, but like we subbed out going for the half because it was a bye game, and I'm pretty sure either they were leading or like we were just barely up. But like they were definitely like really solid Masonic, and I get the whatever like the format's different and stuff, but like Springfield's just a team that knows a lot.
Yeah, yeah, they're definitely a very strong team. With NAQD State being definitely their strongest performance this season. So anyway, number 7 on the list is Fremd. Um, Fremd led by Danny Kim, a literature, just general humanities specialist. I guess generalist at this point, supported by Shreya on science and Brian in history, and Gavin for other things. Let's see. Definitely a very strong team. They've been strong, and I think this team has been together for a while. Last year's in EQT State, they brought the same top 3, Brian, Shreya, and Danny. They covered the big 3 solidly. I've been impressed by a lot of their play. They brought it close against us at NEQT State when we didn't have Ethan, which is still just like how Govinless Stevenson is strong. Ethanless Uni is also still a very strong team. So I was definitely impressed by them there. At Scobel Solo, Brian actually brought me to the last toss-up in our game. He played very well against me, and I was incredibly impressed by him. And then Shreya has just always been a very strong science specialist, and I think that they are looking very good going into next year, given that they retain their top 3 scores. So yeah, do you have any anecdotes about Fremd? I know you've played them several times this season.
Yeah, we Friend is like probably like aside from you guys, of course, like I think Friend goes on like to the next 3 teams below you guys. So like we most dread playing basically because they're just so strong and they're particularly strong in the big 3, like history, literature and science, which is also our strength. So it makes like a really fun matchup. If you look at Dylan Bowman's literature player ranking poll, you'd see that I mentioned an anecdote where we beat Friend by only 5 at kickoff. And that's because there are only 3 literature questions, which Danny got. And if there was a 4th literature question, there's no doubt in my mind that Danny would have powered that 2 or 10 at least, and we would have lost that game. Like Danny can consistently get points across the board, especially in literature and fine arts, and then Shreya and Brian can like take history and science off of us. And with history and science being our strengths, like yeah, we're definitely scared of Friend, so they deserve this position.
Yeah, I agree. I think this team's one main weakness is they don't have too many points of like really strong uh specific specialism. Like Danny's music, I think, is his best category, or perhaps one of his areas of literature. But he definitely doesn't have a lock on the literature canon in a way that some other players do. And Brian and Shreya are both very strong players in their specialties, but they sometimes aren't able to bring up the firepower against some higher ranked teams. But I do think that Fremd is still very deserving of the spot, and like depending on how you uh, do this ranking, they could be as high as number 4, number 5. So I think that there's definitely some room for them to punch up. And yeah, Friend was just a very strong team this season. So number 6 on the ballot, on my ballot, Chicago Christian, led primarily by Ben Fry. Let's see, Ben Fry just, as I established in my individual player ballot, one of the top generalists in Illinois. Strong in basically every subject. I know he said history is his weakness, but his areas of he's very strong in literature, fine arts, thought, and science. I guess, of course, this team's one main weakness would be the fact that Ben is definitely 80 or 90% of the scoring. I know that there are some other scoring options of the team, like Nicholas Cadela had some very strong performances later in the season, but in general, I think that the reliance on Ben is a weakness. But for what is essentially a team led by one generalist, Ben does a very good job of covering his bases and keeping his team in good morale. So I don't know. I've just been very impressed by when we played them throughout the season. I know when we lost, so we lost to them at 2019 Masonic State, and I was very mad afterwards because I just didn't view Chicago Christian as that good of a team. But after seeing them play at several tournaments this year, it's really solidified in my mind that Ben Fry is a very strong player, and I was very wrong to dismiss him as just like a one-off generalist, and I think that they've had a very impressive run this year. So, do you have any experience playing against Chicago Christian?
I think we played them at Early Bird, but like I've not played them nearly as many times as you have. But I can say generally like Renfri is just like a really scary super generalist of sorts. So yeah, there's no way that like not to like dismiss his teammates, but like there's no way if he hadn't been like so committed and so good at the game that Chicago Christian would like be on the list. But I think the fact that he's just so good like automatically warrants him a top 10 place.
Yeah, I agree. So number 5 on this list is okay. Yeah, Hinsdale Central. Um, let's see, Hinsdale Central, captained by Thomas Mercurio. Other strong specialists include literature and myth specialist Ali Yang, history specialist Leon, science specialist Pinocchi, and Manvit is also a generalist. I think. I don't think it was ever really. I don't think I was ever informed of what exactly his specialty was, but definitely a very strong team. I think just like Springfield, they had a very strong breakout performance at NEQT State, which is what leads me to place them higher than other teams that I consider to be in their tiers, such as Chicago Christian and Fremd. They placed fourth, where they put up 62 powers, having the third highest power count in the field and 19 PPB, which is definitely solidly above a lot of these teams in the third championship playoff and third and fourth championship brackets. So Hinsdale Central definitely, I think their strongest subject is literature, with Thomas and Ali both doubling up on that. Aside from that, they have strong specialism in other areas. Just a very strong, well-rounded team. Yeah. Do you have any anecdotes from playing them at all? I know that I think you played them at NEQT State, right? So
Yep.
there's that.
Uh, yeah, I have a lot of anecdotal evidence, unfortunately, because Hinzel's like, I don't, yeah, Hinzel's just been like a very, very strong team this season, especially against Stevenson, which I do not like as much. Like at NEQT State, and like the final score, like that shows it's a close game. But like at the half, they were winning by a pretty significant amount. And same thing at HFT. The second time we played them again, they were winning, and I wasn't there, but like at Ultima, I think Govan said that they only beat Instill because they won on a protest. Like Instill like has been like really strong against us, and like you said, like their main category is literature, but like it's not like they're weak in any of the other categories. Thomas is a pretty solid generalist. He has like I don't think he has that many like big holes or whatever, and then his teammates are also like all really good specialists or generalists in their own right. So yeah, Hinzel, good.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kinsdale is definitely a very strong, well-rounded team. If I were to say one weakness about this team, it would be their propensity to go on neg streaks. I know that they curb this a lot, and Thomas definitely had definitely kept his negs under control at NEQT State, which I think was a big factor in why they performed so well. But at other tournaments in the season, most notably Loyola Ultima, he was prone to going on a few neg streaks, which fortunately seem to have ended here. So I think that were the season were to go on, and had they played at nationals, we definitely would have seen this new Hinsdale Central taking out a bunch of names. So anyway, number 4 on the list is Barrington. So I guess I might as well put IMSA here because I know this is the Barrington and IMSA are typically viewed as pretty even teams, and I think that going over why I chose to rank IMSA over Barrington would perhaps make for some interesting content. So Barrington, definitely a very strong, well-rounded team, just like Hinsdale Central. I think that they're more defined in that Liam is the definitive history player, Roxanne is the literature player, and Abraham is the science and fine arts player. So they covered the big three very well. Yeah, I mean, they covered the big three very well. They had a very strong PVB at NEQT State, over 20, which is very impressive. Aside from that, they had also had very good power count. Just like they had a close power count to Hinsdale Central, which puts them solidly above the teams beneath them. They also had a very strong performance at kickoff, where I think they put up over 10 powers a game, which was about what Uni put up. So I was definitely very impressed by that. They also, in History Bowl, beat Stevenson, which is like a historical moment, I suppose. So Barrington has definitely been an impressive team all year. If I were to say that, if I were to I guess, talk about their weakness, it would be just like Frem, they don't have that much pinpoint specialism. They are very strong in their categories, but like when it comes to contesting them with deeper specialists, sometimes they fall short. Although I know that they've had close games against Stevenson, so perhaps I'm wrong about this. Um, but yeah, do you have any like what do you think about Barrington?
I mean, I personally like. I also like was debating between IMSA and Barrington, and in my ballot, which no one really wants to hear about, but like in my ballot, I ranked Barrington third and IMSA fourth, mainly because like the sort of like the again like the fear thing I was discussing, like which team are you more scared to play? And Barrington's probably the team that like we probably like that was probably the strongest against us other than Uni this season. Like at ACFL, like we didn't have Govan, and there were and like we only narrowly won that on the last toss up or something. But like at Penn Bowl, which is a harder difficulty set, so that indicates like ability to scale up. And we had full team. Like the I want to say that they were leading after toss up 18 or something, or like the game wasn't decided until the last two toss ups, and so they definitely ran really close. And like you said, the History Bowl game again, like this is like full Stevenson History Bowl team, and I think this is the first loss like Govind had since his freshman year, something crazy like that. Like Barrington's just like really deep at in so many categories. Like yeah, they're too good.
Yeah, Barrington is definitely a very strong team, and as you said, like how you ranked Barrington over IMSA, this could honestly go either way. They're basically neck and neck, and I think that Barrington has had more better statistical performances than IMSA this season. But at the same time, IMSA hasn't had that many statistical performances this season due to a debacle at kickoff. But the reason that I put IMSA over Barrington, just like how you said that you perceive Barrington to be more threatening than IMSA, because of your past experiences with them and your run-ins with them, I personally consider throughout the season IMSA to be a stronger threat to upsetting us than Barrington was, and that's because even like at our early bird game, like Matthew Lee was pulling off like a lot of toss-ups off us, like to the point where I think that if full IMSA had shown up with Daniel and Andy, or whatever their full roster would have been, I think that definitely would have been a closer game. So aside from Matthew Lee, who is just a very strong specialist in general, strong in history, fine arts, areas of science. Good across the board, honestly. He's definitely a very strong generalist. There's Daniel Lee, his second scorer, who didn't show up too much this season. I think his commitment to his bowl was perhaps waning, according to him. But I mean, Daniel had always been a solid humanities player in literature and philosophy and some areas of fine arts. So definitely a strong number two. And Daniel's performance, especially on last year's pace, really like astounded me, and definitely is a big reason why I perceive IMSA to be such a huge threat. Andy Tang, former teammate of mine, I suppose, is a very strong science specialist, and I could easily see him getting science off of me. So that's why I perceived IMSA to be a stronger threat against us than Barrington was. Not to say that Barrington wasn't a threat; they certainly ran us close in some games in seasons past. And even though the score wasn't that close against us, and EQT State for a while, like they were neck and neck with us, prying quite a few toss-ups off of our big three. So I feel like these teams are very close. I just gave it to IMSA because of personal experience, in my opinion. But of course, if you disagree with me, make sure to submit a ballot so that your voice can be heard. And then the top two, which I assume no one is really surprised by, given that I'm pretty sure every ballot had this: two Stevenson, one Uni. So these are our two teams. Do you want to talk about your team and then I can talk about mine?
So I guess Stevenson, like this year, we lost Olivia from last year, who was like one of the top literature players in the nation. But I think we rebuilt quite nicely. Govind was our like captain and lead scorer this year. He was like mostly history, religion, mythology, geography, current events. Although he was a really good generalist, as you can see as his global solo performance, and I think he was basically the top player in Illinois this year. You can also check Dylan's ballot for the individual player poll in the same playlist as this video, so go check that out if you haven't. Um, I don't know, I provide like some backup to go up in like history and current events, and I got like some out of category buzzes as well. David Lee was already good at science last year, but like this year he was really, really good. Like he was putting up over 40 PPG at HFT and Callisto, I think, so quite good. And we didn't know who our fourth score was gonna end up being going into this year, but Dangle Ding has been a pretty solid literature player. He had good power numbers at I think HFT and Ultima again. And he got two powers on Penn Bowl, which is like college difficulty, so it's definitely very impressive. we lose Govind after this year, but hopefully Stevenson can still do good things next year.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about talking about how David Lee and Daniel Ding both emerged as strong specialists in their areas this year. Like, if you look at last year's stats compared to this year's, it's just a completely different David. His science specialism was much stronger this year. I never really considered him to be that threatening in science last year, but this year, especially after his performance at Early Bird and our games at NEQT State, he's definitely solidly, in my mind, the number 2 science specialist in Illinois. Daniel Ding also impressed me with his literature buzzes at NEQT State, pulling a power off of Ethan Ashbrook, which is definitely very impressive. Yeah, I think that your guys, a lot of the X factor this year was that David and Daniel were able to step up, and of course, Govind and you being the anchors that you are, definitely made Stevenson a very threatening team this year. And then I suppose I'll talk about Uni, composed of myself and Ethan Ashbrook and Jonathan Lau. We cover the big three: science, literature, history, respectively. I also do fine arts. Ethan does RMPSS. Jonathan does, I suppose, geography and current events, which sounds like a very strict and divided distribution between us, but there's a lot of overlap with Jonathan knowing quite a bit of science and fine arts, and I know some literature, and Ethan knows some history. So there's a lot of doubling up among our team. Our fourth player, Sasha Rushing, helps with history and current events. Definitely proved himself to be a very solid 4 scorer this year. He was, I think, his buzzes at Early Bird were a lot of. Well, he won quite a few games for us. I think he was the X factor in our 2 Stevenson games, I believe. And at NEQT State, he also had some very strong performances. So yeah, Sasha's just been a very strong 4 scorer this entire season. Definitely contributes to Jonathan's holes in history and also just general knowledge. So he definitely a welcome presence on the team. I suppose we were perceived as the number 1 threat going into this year, number 1 team. I'd like to think that we maintained our status, even. Yeah, I think we definitely proved ourselves this year. I was impressed, and although I am sad that we weren't able to play at nationals, I am happy that I was able to spend time with my team and have a great season. So yeah, do you have any words about Uni, I suppose?
Yeah, I'll like not make this a big rant like I did in the fine arts poll, but you were like, I don't know, if you didn't know that Uni was the top player this season, you clearly didn't pay attention. I would argue that, I mean, not just I think like many people in the community would argue they're not just the top in Illinois, they were top nationally. They put up like dominant numbers and dominant performances at like sets of all different difficulties, like HS regs, but also scaling up into like D2 SCT and Penn Bowl, even when they were incomplete, like not having Jonathan at Penn Bowl and not having Ethan Ashbrook at WUFAT, which was unweight. They were still able to beat top teams like being Miami Valley at weight and stuff. So I don't know. I think Uni was just another level above us, and I'm kind of sad that we didn't close the gap. But on the other side, and you just have to like appreciate pure talent, like you see with Uni.
Thank you for the kind words. For what it's worth, I never considered us to be a level above you guys. Like, even if you look at the Grug ranks in the midseason and postseason polls, like, Stevenson is still a solidly top 10 team nationwide. And I think that your win against us at NEQT State definitely brought us down from our ivory tower, if you will. And we definitely had to fight for those last 2 games against you guys. And that's probably the most epic final that I've ever played. So definitely thanks to you guys for this rivalry that has continued throughout these years. And thanks everyone for a good season. Thanks for watching this video series. There's been a lot of support. So thanks, and hopefully I can maintain my current trend of giving you guys high quality Quiz Bowl content. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and share. And I guess I will see you guys whenever I post next. Goodbye.